Qualities needed to reconnect with family, episode 3, humility. A part of the series, conflict resolution insights from Brett Lovett's The Compassion Project and FamilyReconcile.com. This is the topic for today.
Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by InstantMediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent.
Hello and welcome in our today's podcast. I am Natalia Orłowska-Czajka, advocate, mediator and arbitrator based in Warsaw, Poland.
Hi everyone, Mac Pierre-Louis here, attorney, mediator and arbitrator working throughout Florida and Texas.
Hello, and I'm Brett Levitt, founder of FamilyReconcile.com.
All right, thank you so much, Brett, for being back again to discuss another part of this long-term series we've been doing with you on reconciling with family. And today's quality is humility. Now, we had done 2 previous ones. The first was on deference. The next was on gratitude. And so today you're going to touch on this quality of humility and how it can aid in bringing families together. Again, we're all mediators, so we deal with people's interpersonal conflicts all the time. And so it's great to hear how these one-word character traits, qualities can be such big deals on helping people come back together, especially now when we are all coming back together in a way because of it's after COVID-19. All right, Brett, what is humility?
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Mac. That was really well said. These one-word qualities, I think, really are a big deal. So I appreciate you saying that. Humility. Here's the definition out of Webster's. It says it is a modest or low view of one's importance. So a modest or low view of one's importance. Here's the issue I have seen is I think it's often misinterpreted by people. This is what I think people hear. A modest or low view of one's self. So you see the difference? I think people interpret it or hear it as a modest or low view of oneself when it's actually a modest or low view of one's importance. It made me think of, and I don't know if you've done this or if Natalia's done this, I know I've done this, is you have some song that you hear at some point in your life and you like it and it comes on the radio or whenever you're in the house and so you start singing it. You've never seen the lyrics, you're learning it by heart, right? Has this ever happened to you where after some time you either somehow you see the lyrics or you're singing it in front of somebody else and somebody says, that's not what it says right there. And you're like, oh, okay. So you either catch yourself or somebody else catches you, singing a wrong word, right? Or a wrong phrase in the song. So once you understand the word, what it really says or what the phrase is that it really says, often that can change the meaning of the song for you. And I think that is a lot of what these definitions are like, especially something like humility. So I think people hear it's a low or modest view of one's self, but it isn't. So you're singing the song a little bit wrong. You're a little bit right, but you're a little bit wrong because it's a low or modest view of one's importance. There's an author, ancient writer, and he illustrated it this way, and I thought it was applicable to the quality of humility. And he was talking about body parts. So he said, does the eye, and it illustrates the problem with self-importance. So this is or the fallacy of self-importance. He says, does the eye tell the toe or the foot, you're not needed, or I'm more important than you? Is the eye more prominent than the toe? Yeah, that's usually what you see. Often people who will look will say you have beautiful eyes or you have gorgeous eyes, or they'll notice the eyes, right? Rarely do people say, you have a beautiful toe I love your toe. So in half the time, the toe is covered up. So do we have, he was illustrating, we have body parts that are all part of the same body. Some are more prominent than others. But because others are more prominent, does that mean that the others that are less prominent are not needed? Well, I think the answer is obvious there. So not only do we have less prominent parts and more prominent parts, we even have special parts, right? And those special parts we often cover up. Can any one part tell the other part they're not needed? I don't think so. And it would be ridiculous to do that. Yet that is something that I think we deal with one another, and we deal with in our relationships. Is sometimes there's a self-importance, an excessive self-importance, and we can, without maybe even saying it in word, we can act like we're more important, like the other person isn't needed, or we are more prominent. And so I just thought the way that he illustrated that was good for the topic of discussion and what humility is and what it isn't.
Thank you so much for touching on the definition first. It's always good and important to know what we are talking about and to define it correctly. What you also embraced in this definition is the self-value. How we value ourselves is not really touched by humility at all, because the value of ourselves, the importance of ourselves remains the same. However, we humbly notice that the importance of ourselves in a particular situation, in a particular environment, is not really the key factor in the situation we are in. And this is how I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And also, please tell me, since it is an obvious virtue that we admire in others, it's not really easy, as all the things that we say are obvious are not really easy for us to achieve and practice in our lives.
That's so true, Natalia. I think for all of us, again, I speak in generalities, so it's not in every single case, but I think for all of us, we admire humility when we see it in others. What I don't see after that is I don't see people also viewing it as an essential quality. So they admire it when they see it in others. I don't see them viewing it by and large as an essential quality. So people who are humble or people who are humble will not look at somebody else and say that person's humble or that person isn't humble. People that are humble make great allowance for other people. And so what you'll see is somebody that'll say, well, I don't think they're inclined. I think the language is important here. And a humble person will generally say, well, that person doesn't seem to be too inclined towards humility. Or they might say, that person seems a little bit more inclined, towards humility. So they allow through their language for this great space for others. It's not black and white, you either have it or you don't. The focus is on other people. How are you focused on other people when you use language like that? Well, you're allowing for somebody who may not be humble to learn that quality, to become humble. So humble people are very, they're not very directive and black and white and this is this and that is that. They allow for this great space for people to operate in. Why? Because the focus is on others, not on their self. And this is going to lead back to our definition. So, and this is one of two main points. The whole session today could be based on this point and probably another point I'll make in a little bit. The opposite of humility is pride. Okay, really excessive pride. So the opposite of humility is pride. Pride requires recognition. Pride requires recognition. Humility expresses recognition. That's the difference between the two. So that's one fundamental point. If you can walk away from the session today, if you got to leave right now and you heard that point, you've heard the root of the matter. The one requires recognition, the other one expresses recognition. Humility is often talked about more, not so much in a secular setting, would you agree, but in religious context. In religious context, humility is a key factor. to borrow from that to illustrate what humility is and how it expresses recognition as opposed to how it requires recognition. In the book of John, chapter 5, verse 30, there's an account of Jesus Christ himself. And he makes this statement. He says, I can do nothing of my own initiative. I can only do what the Father has taught me. Now, here's a man who is perfect. This is the greatest man who ever lived on the planet. If anybody on the planet, think about this, if anybody on the planet could have said, I deserve that recognition, or I require that recognition, it would have been him. But he said, I've done nothing of my own initiative, only what I've been taught. So what did he do there? He didn't require the recognition. He expressed the recognition. He gave it to his Father. He said, what he wasn't saying, oh, I can't do anything. He wasn't saying that. He was saying, what I do isn't of my own originality. What I'm doing, I've learned. And so that's an example in the religious context of how one would express humility as opposed to requiring recognition.
Well, thank you for that. It's a good and profound way to express it. Requiring recognition versus expressing recognition, where the first puts you in focus while the latter puts others first before you. And these things always makes my mind kind of think, well, when do you go too far to not let people walk over you, or to not be allowing people to take advantage of you, or to not become an enabler to a bully? Can you speak a little bit about that, about I guess healthy humility, and what you brought up as the mistaken definition in the very beginning, which was people thinking low of themselves versus not thinking of themselves as important as they may.
Yeah, well said. There's a quote by C.S. Lewis, and he said, humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking less about yourself. Mm-hmm. So hopefully there's another distinction there. So it is simply the profound quality of being able to focus. It's where your focus is. It's the profound quality of being able to focus on others as opposed to yourself. Does that mean you lay down and you're a floor mat, as we've discussed in other episodes? Not at all. People, because of the misinterpretation of the definition, generally think, probably in their mind, whether they know it or not, or cognizant of it or not, probably think it's a weak quality. Mm-hmm. When in fact, it is a virtue of lion-like strength, and why it's also been referred to often as the mother of all virtues. There's a definition I'd like to share, an additional definition I'd like to share at the end of the program today, just kind of wrap it up, that will highlight why it's the mother of all virtues. It's because when it's practiced, you will see by definition, it actually includes or fosters or gives birth, therefore the mother of all virtues, to other qualities. So I'll highlight that towards the end.
So tell us, please, why is humility so hard to acquire and display? Also, family.
I mean, all these qualities we discussed, they're if they're good, for whatever reason, they're difficult to apply because we're so wired towards ourselves and so wired towards self-promotion and whatnot. Some more than others. I think the point is that if we hear these qualities and we're open to working on them, that's the key. And that's a key factor in humility. Why is it so hard to acquire? Once you achieve a level of success, and you tell me whether you agree with this or not. Once you achieve a level of success, and you think, well, look, I've made it, whatever that is. There's a quote by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, psychologist, great quote. He says, whatever got you here is not going to get you there. Okay, so whatever success you've achieved right now and whatever it is that you took to get here to achieve that is not the same that's going to get you over there. And the problem is, or the issue is for many people is that success, once it's achieved, they just kind of stay stagnant in that I've made it. And they just kind of go now through the rest of their life, thinking, well, this is what got me here, thinking that that's what's going to get them there. And there again is a fallacy. Why is it hard? Because we become stagnant. We become a little bit less open to criticism, not so open to suggestion. And that's where the pride comes in. So we can, if we're not careful, if we're not thinking about it, it's difficult to acquire humility, especially when we've reached a level of success, even in the family, as parents, in the business world, whatever it is where you've received it, it becomes a little more difficult because we become less open to things because we've achieved this amount of success. But a humble person doesn't look at it that way. A humble person tends to look at life, whether there's achievement or not, as school. Does that make sense? So life is school to them. And because life is school to them, it allows them to be more open to suggestion, more open to criticism. And I'll just finish this point by saying, criticism, people say, well, that's why humility is a weak quality, because you just accept all criticism. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying you accept all criticism. We're saying that you're open. A humble person is open to criticism and then evaluates that for what they can take from it, because life is school. So they're not above that criticism. You may get criticism that has no value, and okay, well then you know what to do with it. Or you may get criticism that has some points that you can learn to work on your own weaknesses. And again, humility is a recognition of not only your strengths but your weaknesses. Whereas a person of pride and arrogance and self-importance, they don't even think they have weaknesses, let alone wanting to give attention to working on them. So those are some hurdles as to why it's difficult to acquire humility, for people.
So help us now apply this to our relationships. Give us some points, quotes, and research to keep in mind to help us practice humility and transform our relationships.
Yeah, there's been several studies done on it, and it's and there's many more being conducted right now on this quality of humility. But there's some research out of NASCENT, the NASCENT research group, and they did a study, and in their study they showed that individuals who were given whose decision making was more grounded in humility. It mentioned that they were by and large happier people because they were content. I thought that was interesting. People who are humble are content. Their relationships were stronger because there was less stress involved in their relationship, and because of that, they had a very positive outlook, as opposed to a control group that had different tasks that were not centered on humility. So, research essentially shows, without getting too scientific or technical, that humility is good for our relationships because it gets us thinking about the other person. And in essence, if you're more open to suggestion, if you're more open to, there was another study, and they did it in a secular setting, and leaders that were that had traits of humility, they were more open to suggestion and opinions from the workforce. And what that did is it allowed the workforce to say, okay, we can trust them. And then it empowered the workforce because they knew that they could be seen and heard. If you can empower the workforce, then you can empower your relationships that you're having within the family. So when you're humble, the focus isn't on yourself and your authority and your importance. The focus is on empowering others. Now, you tell me how empowering others, especially in the family relationship, is not going to contribute in a wonderful way to strengthening relationships and allowing for contentment. Humility is the mother of all virtues. It's not something you're going to learn overnight. It's something that has to be practiced and worked at, but it starts with an accurate understanding. And then from there, you can build out and really work on this quality. It is the mother of all virtues.
Recently, Brett, we've been talking about gratitude and deference, and especially gratitude. I heard there are studies and researches that show that gratitude is very strongly connected with humility. And can you explain how it works?
Yeah, this is where I wanted to circle back around to that secondary definition, and perhaps that'll answer it for you. So here's another definition. So humility is one who sees and accepts their own strengths and limitations without defensiveness or judgment. Okay. I'll read the first quote I gave to you, or the first definition was a modest or low view of one's own importance. Okay. So look at the qualities when we're talking about the mother of all virtues, and we're borrowing from that expression of mother and then giving birth. Look at the qualities that humility gives birth to. So I'll break it down. It says one who sees, okay, so that would be what? Self-awareness, right? So humility births self-awareness. One who sees and accepts. Okay, well, accepting is a level of maturity. So it's birthing maturity, okay? Because it takes maturity to look at oneself. So one who sees and accepts their own strengths and limitations, that's balance, because you're looking not just at one, you're not just looking at your strengths, you're not just looking at your weaknesses, you're looking at both. So that goes to balance. And it says without defensiveness or judgment. Another definition for defensiveness and judgment was the very anxious quality of avoiding criticism or challenge. Wow, that's interesting. So here we have self-awareness, we have maturity, we have balance, and then the not the need to be anxious over deflecting criticism or challenge. All of that birthed by practicing the quality of humility. That makes it a powerful quality, and one that no relationship should be without.
Thank you. And it's, sometimes when you think of certain, I guess, green foods that are healthy for you, there's bound to be in the market, one super pill, right? One super green food that if you take this, it's going to give you all the nutrients you need from all these other important things. So if people could just boil it down to practicing humility and waking up every day and trying to exercise that more often, then you'll also indirectly apply these other types of virtues in your life.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so that's the main point that we can carry away. You express humility, then at the same time, you really, as Natalia brought out by the research, you're really expressing gratitude. So they're both symbiotic with one another. So if we can remember that point, and the second, I'd say, most powerful point is that we're empowering other people. What those two things and the understanding of those will mean to our relationships are so powerful. And so I encourage all of us, including myself, to continue to work on them.
Thank you. So we're going to be wrapping it up now. We're in 23 minutes in, and this has been another talk about qualities needed to reconnect with family with Brett Lovett, founder of FamilyReconcile.com. So anybody who might be watching can certainly check out the YouTube video and see some of the information we're going to put in the description. But if you're listening, just remember, FamilyReconcile.com is a site. And that's it for now. I'm Mac Pierre-Louis from instantmediations.com.
Natalia Łowska-Czajka, instantmediations.com.
And I'm Brett Lovett from FamilyReconcile.com. And thank you for the time.
All right. Thank you, guys. See you later.
Bye.